A forgotten artifact lies in pieces on a planet far from Earth. Few know it exists except those who took it back and those whose ancestors created it. 4 young people are thrown into a race against emissaries of the gods to find its pieces. Mistrust, greed, and magic are tangled in an endless web. What will the fate be of the universe once it is found and reassembled? Get Scepter of the Gods, The Rod of Truth now on Amazon, and get wrapped up in the saga that will not let you go.
Good morning, and welcome to the Motivational Devotional, where we are merging motivation and spirituality to create a daily dose of confident positivity. I hope that this morning's podcast will help you to be more spiritually and positively motivated so that you can transform your day. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining me today at the Motivational Devotional. I am Mark the Writer, and today is the 3rd episode of my New Year's series, 50 Ways to Love Your Soul. I am assuming you have set some goals for yourself this year, and as I am going to remind everybody every day, I hope you have made them bigger than you can currently accomplish so that you have to grow into the person who can do it to be able to nail your goals. My greatest hope for anyone listening to this or reading it on the motivational-devotional.com blog is to say this year right along with me, I've got this. No doubt, man, I've got this because I'm doing it and making progress. I'm also going to remind everyone who listens to or reads each episode that I jumped off into this series without having defined all the titles and without being entirely certain how this is going to go. The reason for that is that I want everybody who will listen to realize that you don't have to have a perfect plan to get started with something if you grow to trust that the universe always has your back. See, I threw that in early today, huh? Too many people, and I was just like this for a long time, won't get started with working toward a lifelong dream without everything being perfectly planned and in place. But most of the time, you just need to get started. You can sit around and figure it out until everything passes you by. But if you get started, you can pause and plan here and there along the way. I started with the end in mind, having a clear vision of what the series is about. But I said publicly that I was going to do it because when you do that, you make yourself accountable to everybody who heard it, and they will, by golly, for sure, let you know if you quit. I don't quit. Today, as I record this 3rd episode, I know exactly where this is going, and I'm working on pieces of it every day with relentless intent. This is going to be really cool, and if you will follow me along every day, I guarantee you will see yourself more positively with more confidence and less stuff weighing you down. As I share 50 different ways for you to be your own best Valentine, I am sure there will be a handful of things that work great in helping you grow into who you want to be. If you know anyone who could use some encouragement in setting goals and taking life by the tail, then this is it. Share this podcast or share the blog version from motivational-devotional.com if they would prefer to read it. Today, I'm sharing a few thoughts about what it means to love forgetting. Yesterday, we talked about love forgiving, and I mentioned that forgiving and forgetting are entwined. So we need to remember to forget, right? As with forgiving, this needs to be way early in this series because forgiveness really isn't complete without also letting go. This gets a bit tricky. For at least the first half of my life, I was one of those people who not only gave others the benefit of the doubt, I gave them 2nd, 3rd, 4th, maybe even 100 chances, and I had a really hard time learning my lesson about not getting walked all over by other people. I was raised in a pastor's household, and both of my parents were 2 of the most generous, loving, compassionate, and forgiving people you would ever want to meet. Everybody who knew them would say the same thing. That sounds wonderful, and all of us should hope to be so well thought of after we've left this world, but along with that, I grew up with the impression that I should never stand up for myself. I was a kid, and then a teenager, and then an adult who didn't believe that I could stand up for myself. I was a lot like Ralph Macchio in Karate Kid before he met Mr. Miyagi, but I never had a Mr. Miyagi. I had to figure out ways all on my own to grow the strength to love myself as much as I was trying to act in a loving way with other people. A lot of my journey, and some people listening to or reading this might be struggling with the same thing, was to learn how to forgive someone while also not allowing them to continue doing things that needed forgiving. I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, I can forgive, but I sure don't forget." They mean that they will let it go and not get even. But what they really mean is that they're just not going to make any more of it. But that isn't really forgiveness. Forgetting is a huge piece of it. And to be able to do it in a healthy way means separating a wrong from the person who did the wrong thing. Which of those two do you think should be the object of forgiveness? The person or the act? The wrong they did to you? Well, if you forgive an act, you are forgiving something that only exists in the past, which means it doesn't exist now. What exists now is whatever you are telling yourself about that wrong, and what would that be? If somebody went around telling lies about you for some reason and it hurt you, I mean it cut you to the core, then to forgive that wrong itself is pointless because it's been done and it's in the past. And so, this is where it gets tricky. You have to do a little personal inventory and realize that although you may be upset and your feelings are hurt, you aren't physically hurt. Maybe trust has been violated. Maybe you feel foolish because you thought that person was a real friend. Or maybe you knew they weren't a real friend and you beat yourself up for not being wise enough to keep that from happening. But how can you keep something like that from happening? None of us can control the destructive actions of other people. Can't do it. And that person was just acting consistently with their true nature. Now, here is where the tricky part comes in. We have to reframe what we tell ourselves about things like this. We have to tell ourselves things that build up rather than tear down our belief in our strengths. We have to remind ourselves that the mean things other people do are no reflection on our character, our abilities, and our relentless pursuit of a lifelong dream. None of it. With a positive message going on inside about a wrong a person does, we can then look to that person and work to forgive them, but even that isn't the tricky part. The tricky part is to release any ill will you feel toward that person and any thoughts of retribution and, well, literally any, and I mean any, attachment you feel toward that person. If looking at that person tweaks anger or a sick feeling in your gut or tears or makes you clench your jaw or starts to trigger some depression, then you still have some forgiving to do. Please always remember this. Forgiving is not the same thing as condoning. I mean, when you forgive someone, that doesn't mean that you are saying what they did was okay. And it doesn't mean that once you forgive them, you're going to suddenly be besties. In real life, there usually is very little kiss and make up. But if you feel resentment toward that person, you're still not done. Sometimes the best we can do is get to the point where we forget that person even exists. And when their name is brought up or you run into them somewhere and you feel nothing at all, then you not only forgave them, you forgot. Because what has to be forgotten is the attachment to the engagement. I feel like we should be clear that letting people walk all over you isn't a practice of forgiveness either, because what that really does is build up more resentment within you. So, if somebody commits a wrong that should be forgiven, and you keep letting them do it again and again, that's where you need to forgive yourself for letting that happen, and build up enough strength from believing in yourself and your self-worth to tell them calmly and clearly, no, I am not going to allow you to do that anymore. A bully, just like in Back to the Future, where Biff gets away with all kinds of stuff like that, is best dealt with by the light of truth. We don't do this out of retribution, but quite often someone will either leave you alone or stop doing what they're doing just by you letting their actions be public and letting the truth be the thing that deals with them. Again, there has to be no attachment to feelings of retribution or comeuppance. Like Mr. Miyagi simply doing wax on, wax off, you just let that person do what they do, but with a spotlight on it. Keep in mind that some people never learn. That doesn't mean you can't forget any attachment with them. Learning to release attachment to anything caught in space and time is one of the most freeing things we can learn to do. Regret and resentment only exist in the past, and that is caught in time. Regrets are indications you need to forgive yourself. Resentments are indications you need to forgive other people. But even when you have, then the forgetting part is to release the attachment to whatever is in the past. The reason I said at the beginning that it's tricky is because forgetting doesn't fully mean that you don't remember. We might remember the same way we remember the lines of a poem or a song, but we don't remember the emotional attachment that went along with it. You could recount it as history, but not retain it as misery. Hey, that's pretty good. I'll have to write that down. Oh, wait, I just did. Okay, so I'll just say it again, because it really is good, and it really is the truth. Grow enough to forget emotional attachments to wrongs others have done to you that cause regret and resentment, to the point that you could recount them as history, but not retain them as misery. In the freedom you receive in doing that, you will surely know that all of creation is conspiring in your favor. Trust yourself and trust that the universe always has your back. Zen master Dogen Zenji, who lived in the 13th century Japan, said, "Do not be concerned with the faults of other persons. Do not see others' faults with a hateful mind." There is an old saying that if you stop seeing others' faults, then naturally seniors are venerated and juniors are revered. Do not imitate others' faults. Just cultivate virtue. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. Please help keep this podcast going by following the Motivational Devotional Facebook page, following @Threefold-Way Radio on Twitter, and sharing the written format of today's message from motivational-devotional.com on your social media. I am deeply grateful for your support, and thank you for letting Motivational Devotional be part of your journey. Peace out. See you tomorrow.
Motivational Devotional is a production of Threefold Way Radio, LLC.